Welcome to the deep dive. You've given us some fascinating source material today, excerpts from a text titled Essential English for Global Purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that title itself feels like a bit of a trap.
How so?
Well, our mission here isn't just to, summarize a book. It's to really get at what its authors mean by essential. We all think we know English, but when you look at it globally, wow,
It changes completely.
it changes so drastically.
Yeah.
Essential suddenly means three totally different things. It's like asking for a Swiss Army knife that also needs to be a surgeon's scalpel and, I don't know, a shovel.
And that's what I find so fascinating here. The source material right from the start just refuses to treat English as this one single thing, a monolith.
Right.
It gets that the purpose is what drives everything. So it immediately breaks it down into these three really distinct spheres of use: English for travel, English for business, and English for school.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Because if we accept that framework, then everything changes, right? The core stuff, the vocabs, the grammar, even how you're supposed to sound, it all has to shift depending on what you're doing.
Totally.
Are you asking for directions, or are you negotiating a multi-million-dollar contract, or, writing a PhD thesis? We need to figure out how those three things differ for you, the listener.
The whole rule book just flips. You're moving from language as, say, a tool for a simple transaction.
Like buying a train ticket.
Exactly. To language as a tool for credibility. And then finally, to language as a tool for complex analysis. Three different jobs, three different tools.
Let's start at the beginning then with that sort of minimum viable language, English for travel.
Mm-hmm.
When the source calls this essential, what does that actually imply in that kind of immediate, maybe even high-stress context? We're talking about instant communication, yeah.
Absolutely. This is all about what we call functional fluency. It's focused completely on transactional communication.
So just getting things done.
Just getting things done. The English you need here has to prioritize clarity, speed, and just basic comprehension in these critical situations. Transport, finding your hotel, or, God forbid, emergency requests.
Okay, so what does that look like grammatically?
Well, the linguistic focus is really narrow, but it's deep. The source material talks a lot about simple tenses, present simple, the imperative mood, tell me, show me.
Direct command.
Very direct. You have to be confident with core vocabulary for things like quantities, time, directions, numbers, prepositions. You just need to be able to say, the train leaves at 5, or I need a doctor now.
But hold on, isn't there a risk there? If you focus only on that transactional stuff for travel, don't you create a kind of trap? What happens the moment you go off script?
That's a great question.
Like, say you're trying to explain a really complex food allergy, or your flight's been misrouted and you need to explain the whole situation.
And that is the underlying challenge of this first pillar. Grammatically, it's off of the simplest, right? You don't need the future perfect continuous tense to buy a bottle of water.
Right.
But that functional need for speed and for the accuracy of basic data, that is absolutely non-negotiable for just moving around the world. If you can't ask where the bus leaves from or clarify a mistake on your bill, your whole trip is hampered.
So the goal is just survival, really.
Survival and successful navigation. Clarity over complexity. And there's a high tolerance for grammatical mistakes as long as the core message, that immediate need, gets across. It's the absolute foundation for global movement.
Okay. So let's make the jump. We're going from the urgency of asking for a glass of water to the seriousness of a quarterly budget review.
It jump.
A huge jump.
Yeah.
We're on to the second pillar, English for business. This is where it gets really interesting for me because the demands just instantly and dramatically increase. You're moving from communicating needs to communicating what? Value? Intent.
The demands absolutely skyrocket. Business English immediately requires specialized, really precise vocabulary.
It's often industry specific, right?
Sure, yeah. Finance, tech, logistics.
Exactly. But I think even more importantly, it demands that you master a professional register.
And that's different from travel because travel is so immediate, so verbal.
Right. Business involves structured interaction, things like negotiation, formal presentations, detailed documentation. So the main skill shifts from just basic survival to professional success and credibility. You have to convey trustworthiness through how you use the language.
I get the need for precision in, say, a contract. But what does the source material say about how the grammar itself has to shift to get that precision? It can't just be about learning more nouns.
That is an excellent point, and it's not.
Yeah.
It forces you to master complex structures that the travel context just never asks for.
Like what?
For instance, the appropriate use of the passive voice becomes essential in professional writing.
Why is that? Because it keeps things objective. It shifts the focus from who did it to the action or the result. So you say, the terms were agreed upon, not we agreed upon the terms,
It sounds more impersonal, more formal.
which is exactly what you want in a formal report. And another thing is modal verbs, words like may, might, or could, they become crucial for soft negotiation.
Ah, so you wouldn't just say, send the report now.
Never. You'd say something like, could you possibly submit the final figures by tomorrow? That subtle softening is essential for maintaining professional relationships, especially in a global team.
So the grammar isn't just about being accurate. It has to be used strategically to manage relationships and even to manage risk.
Yes.
I mean, ambiguity in business isn't just annoying, it could be disastrous. One poorly phrased clause in a contract could lead to massive legal problems.
That's the key distinction right there. In travel, imperfect grammar might be forgiven as long as your request is understood. In business, that same lack of precision completely undermines your credibility. The language has to build trust through being meticulous, through being formal. It signals that you respect the complexity of what's at stake.
It's fascinating how that one word, essential, just completely transforms. We've gone from high-speed data exchange to high-stakes, formal precision.
Exactly.
So let's move to that third pillar, English for school, for academic purposes. How does the language change again when the goal is purely intellectual?
Well, if business English is about application and getting a resolution, academic English is purely about critical analysis and the process of thinking itself. The demands here are, I would argue, the highest in terms of structural endurance and just the sheer breadth of vocabulary.
Structural endurance, I like that.
The essential parts here include the ability to do rigorous research, to formulate and, sustain these really complex evidence-based arguments, and to process incredibly dense academic texts. It's about consuming and producing knowledge.
Which means we're not just talking about vocabulary anymore. We're talking about the actual architecture of thought. How does the language reflect that intellectual structure?
Well, the source material spends a lot of time on what linguists call meta-discourse markers.
Okay, what are those?
They're the signaling words and phrases that guide a reader through a complex argument. Words like furthermore, conversely, consequently, or in contrast.
Ah, the signposts.
They're the signposts. You don't need them to book a flight, but they are absolutely mandatory if you're trying to link 3 separate research findings into one unified argument.
So it's not enough to ask for directions or even close a deal. In this sphere, you have to analyze, synthesize, critique knowledge using concepts that are often totally abstract. You're building logical relationships over pages, not just one sentence.
Exactly. And there's another crucial element here, which is what we call hedging language.
Hedging.
In academic writing, you are almost never allowed to use absolute terms. You can't just say, this proves climate change.
You have to be more cautious.
You have to be incredibly measured. You say, the evidence suggests a strong correlation, or the data may indicate a shift.
I see. So that mastery of hedging, it allows the writer to stay objective and to show they understand the limits of their own research.
Yes, this ability to avoid being dogmatic through linguistic nuance is a core skill of academic English. And it's a requirement that's completely missing from the immediate needs of travel or even from the assertiveness you often need in business.
That is a fundamental difference. The academic world demands you use language not to just state a fact, but to argue a possibility or critique a position, while always leaving room for someone to prove you wrong. So this category really pushes the boundaries of language. It's for intellectual engagement across borders. It prepares you to be a global thinker, a global researcher.
Yep.
So let's just take a second here and look at the contrast we've built. If a traveler only masters the imperative mood and simple vocab, and a business person masters formality and the passive voice, and a student masters hedging and complex clauses, then none of them are actually equipped for the other two worlds.
That's the entire point of the source text. True fluency for a global purpose isn't about becoming some idealized general native speaker. It's about having linguistic agility, the ability to code switch between these 3 very different toolkits.
It's like being trilingual in the same language.
It is. You can even visualize it.
Yeah.
The sentences you need for travel are short, direct, and highly error-tolerant. For business, they're longer but error-intolerant, focused on precision and jargon.
Right.
And for school, they're long, they're grammatically intricate, and they have to sustain abstract thought over a long, long time. The purpose dictates everything.
So what does this all mean for someone listening, someone who wants to be well-informed about what global English proficiency really is?
I think it means realizing that mastery isn't a single ladder you climb. It's more like 3 parallel disciplines you have to master.
And the functional requirements are constantly
And
shifting.
constantly. You might be perfectly competent to lead a quarterly business meeting, but then you're functionally blocked when you need to quickly ask for police assistance in a foreign city.
Because the vocabulary is completely different.
The survival vocabulary is different from the professional success vocabulary.
And on the flip side, someone who has mastered academic English might sound, I don't know, overly formal and maybe even hard to understand if they try to use complex sentences just to buy a coffee.
Exactly. That's it. And knowing which one to use when, that targeted knowledge, is the ultimate shortcut to success in a global world. You need to know which linguistic muscles to flex and, maybe more importantly, which ones to relax.
Depending on whether your goal is mobility, credibility, or intellectual rigor.
Precisely.
This has been fantastic. Thank you for helping us synthesize these sources and for taking this deep dive into the architecture of Essential English.
My pleasure.
I'll leave you, our listener, with a final provocative thought. If Essential English for Global Purpose really is defined by these 3 pillars, travel, business, and school, which category gives you the most immediately transferable skills to the other 2?
That's a good one.
Does the structural complexity of academic English actually make you better at drafting a business contract? Or does the rapid clarity you learn for travel English surprisingly make your presentations better? Something for you to mull over or explore on your own.
Targeted knowledge isn't just about what you know. It's knowing where and when to apply it. Until next time.